Let me tell you something that happened to a guy I know. He went on 3 dates with a woman he genuinely liked. Smart guy, funny, good job. After the 3rd date, she stopped responding to his texts. He was confused. He replayed every conversation looking for where he went wrong. What he never considered was that the answer wasn't in what either of them said. It was in what she kept showing him with her body the entire time. Signals. He had no framework to interpret, so they just went over his head completely. And that story isn't rare. It's basically the default. Here's the thing. Most dating advice gets completely backwards. It focuses on what to say, what to text, how to open a conversation. But women aren't primarily evaluating men through words. They're broadcasting attraction through their bodies before a conversation even gets interesting. And the men who catch those signals aren't necessarily more charming or better looking. They're just paying attention to the right things. So I want to walk you through 3 specific behaviors that women display when genuine attraction is present. I'm a woman, I've done all of these, my friends have done all of these, and most of the time we genuinely don't know we're doing it because these responses aren't decisions. They're the nervous system running on autopilot. But before we get into the 3 signals, I want to establish something important first. Because there's a mistake a lot of men make even when they do start paying attention to body language. They look for single signals in isolation. One behavior by itself means almost nothing. What actually tells the story is clusters. Multiple signals overlapping in the same interaction. Think of it less like reading a sentence and more like hearing a chord. One note is just a note, but when 3 or 4 notes play together, you suddenly recognize the song. Keep that in mind as we go through this because it changes how you process everything I'm about to say. All right, let's start with the one most men have genuinely never thought about. Signal number 1, her voice. Not what she's saying, her actual voice. The pitch of it, the speed, the rhythm. There's a well-documented phenomenon in vocal behavior research where women's voices change around men they find attractive. Specifically, the pitch drops slightly, not dramatically. We're not talking about a different voice. We're talking about a subtle warmth that enters the tone, a slower cadence, longer pauses between sentences, less of a performance and more of a lean-in. Dr. Susan Hughes at Albright College published research on exactly this. She found that women's vocal patterns shift measurably when they're interacting with men they're romantically interested in compared to men they're not. The voice becomes less clipped, less transactional. It softens in a way that's hard to define, but genuinely easy to feel once you know what you're listening for. What does this sound like in real life? It's the difference between how she talks to you versus how she talks to the bartender. Both conversations might seem friendly on the surface, but there's a texture to one of them that isn't present in the other, a kind of ease. Like the conversation stopped being a performance about 20 minutes ago, and she didn't notice it happening. Compare it to how her voice sounds when she's talking to her girlfriend who just walked in high energy fast. Lots of exclamation points. Now listen to how she sounds when she turns back to you. If that transition comes with a noticeable downshift in pace and a kind of settling that's not an accident, her vocal cords are not lying to you. And this ties directly into the second signal because they often happen at the same time. Signal number 2, the proximity drift. Here's something behavioral scientists call the interpersonal space violation test. It sounds clinical, but the actual concept is simple. Every person walks around inside an invisible bubble of personal space. When strangers interact, that bubble stays intact. When attraction enters the picture, the bubble starts to dissolve from her side. She will close the distance. Not aggressively, not in one obvious move. It's almost always incremental. She shifts slightly forward when she laughs. She leans in to hear something even in a quiet room. She lets her arm brush yours and doesn't correct for it. She stands closer than the situation requires and doesn't seem to notice. Or she does notice and she doesn't move back anyway. That last part is key. Because sometimes you'll see a woman realize how close she's drifted, and instead of creating distance, she just stays there, holds the proximity. Her body made a choice, and her brain decided to ratify it. Dr. Edward Hall, who coined the term proxemics in the 1960s, identified that intimate space begins at roughly 18 inches. When a woman voluntarily enters that zone with you in a social setting, it's not because she miscalculated where she was standing. It's because on some level she wanted to be in that space. The contrast test works well here too. If you're in a group and she maintains a normal social distance with everyone else, but consistently ends up closer to you, then the geometry of the conversation requires that gap isn't random. She's not bad at spatial awareness. She's drawn. And I'll tell you something from personal experience. I once stood in a conversation at a house party completely aware that I was too close to a guy I liked, but also completely unwilling to fix it. I just rationalized saying, "Oh, I'm just leaning against this counter. Oh, the music is loud." My brain invented a dozen explanations for why I wasn't actually doing what I was obviously doing. Women are very creative when we're trying to avoid admitting something to ourselves. But the 4th signal is the one I told myself I'd include because it doesn't show up in most conversations about attraction, and it probably should. Signal number 3, the self-presentation reflex. This is something different. This is not about what her body does passively. This is about what she does actively to herself because of you. When a woman is attracted to a man, she will begin unconsciously grooming and adjusting her appearance in his presence. She smooths her hair, she checks her shirt, she fixes something that wasn't actually wrong, she touches her face, she straightens up, not stiffly. Just she becomes a slightly more curated version of herself without meaning to. What's happening neurologically is that the brain's reward circuitry is activated by his presence, and one of the automatic responses is a kind of appearance recalibration. It's the biological version of wanting to look your best for someone, except it's not a decision, it's a reflex. The research on this comes out of evolutionary psychology. Women in studies who were shown photographs of men rated highly attractive displayed significantly increased self-grooming behaviors during and after viewing compared to control groups. The body preparing itself in the presence of a desired mate is a behavior that shows up across species. In humans, it just looks like touching your hair during a conversation. What makes this one particularly useful is that it's directional. She's not doing this for the room, she's doing it in relationship to you. If you notice that she starts adjusting something about herself right after you walk over, or right after a moment of eye contact, or right after you made her laugh, you're the trigger, not coincidence. And here's the thing I find genuinely fascinating about this signal. It's one of the few where there's a small window of awareness. Sometimes a woman will catch herself fixing her hair around a guy she likes and she'll get a little flustered. You might even see a slight change in her expression right after. A quick look away, a small smile that she tries to contain. That's the moment of self-recognition. And it's usually followed by more of the same behavior because, again, the body isn't really listening to what the brain wants to do about this. So let's bring it all together. Voice softens and slows. Distance closes incrementally. Movement starts to mirror yours, and she begins unconsciously tidying herself in your presence. These are not dramatic signals. Nobody is going to walk up to you and say, here are 3 obvious signs that this woman finds you attractive. It's quieter than that. It always is. That's kind of the point. The signals exist below the level of performance because they're not performances, they're honest. And that's actually the takeaway I want to leave you with, because I think it's more useful than just a checklist. Most men who miss these signals don't miss them because they're not paying attention to women. They miss them because they're paying attention to the wrong things. They're listening to words. They're analyzing what she says and how she says it in a surface-level way. They're looking for an obvious green light that usually never comes because that's not how genuine attraction works. Genuine attraction leaks out through the body before it ever becomes a conversation. And the men who understand that stop waiting for permission in the form of words and start recognizing what's already being communicated. That shift in awareness changes everything. Not because you become manipulative or calculating, but because you stop second-guessing what's actually right in front of you. The signals are there. They've always been there. Now you know what they look like. The only question that's worth asking now is whether you're paying attention when they show up. Thanks for watching.